Jim Rohn told me, I think he was the most quoted guy on the
Yeah.
circuit. And he said to me one day, he said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And I mean, it's just a simple statement, but that was so powerful to me. I'd never heard that.
Mr. Les Hewitt, welcome, welcome, welcome. I've been wanting to do this for a long time with you, and I think it's important to start with a bit of context because even though we've talked so much throughout the years, I want to make sure people fully understand who you are and why I admire you so much. So first of all, you've been my mentor and coach for, and I'm terrible with time, but for years now. And there have been so many different conversations that you've guided me through when it comes to my business, when it comes to my effectiveness and where I spend my time, even just what I was telling you right now about, not editing my videos for my podcast myself and knowing where to focus my time. You've been incredibly pivotal. I really admire you. And I'm really glad that you're taking the time to be on today. And every conversation is a joy. And I mean, even talking to you about my new book and things like that, you're just such an invaluable resource with so much wisdom. So thank you for just spending time with me and always being so giving. I really
Well,
appreciate it.
thank you for the opportunity, Arman. It's always a pleasure.
I appreciate it. So focus was a part of your life for a long time. And it goes without saying that the thing that you really stamped your name around was the power of focus. And that was obviously a New York Times #1 best-selling book. You have coached and consulted countless people around the world on this. But, as we've talked about recently, I mean, you've done that so well for so long. And you've really begun to transition in terms of your energy, your focus, your joy is coming from different places in your life now. In particular, I know one of your passions is soccer. And you
Yes, sir.
obviously grew up, being surrounded by this beautiful game of football. And you have so much interest in things like philanthropy and your organization Kick On, which I'm super excited to get an update on. So, when was it that you kind of paused and said, I'm going to start to put my energy more into these other things? And why did you do that?
Yeah, that happened about 4 years ago when I hit the magic age of 70. And I realized I'd been coaching and training at that point nearly 36 years. Started Power Focus way back in 1983, 82, 83. Went through a whole bunch of iterations with that. And I must say, the number of incredible mentors and teachers I've enjoyed. I mean, I didn't have much of a clue. When I came to Canada, I was still working in a hospital lab, hematology supervisor, wrong job. And then I had my own little DJ business, and I did that on the
I
weekends
didn't
just
know
for
that.
fun and to make a little extra money. And I was good at it. Compared to the people who were doing it, I was brilliant. We had the guys, you go along to a dance or a party or a wedding or whatever it is, and a guy would sit there with two turntables and he wouldn't say a word all night, and he would play the music he wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I can do better than this. So
Wow.
my dad, he used to send me over all the top records from the UK, because in
Mm.
Canada it was like country and western, and ballads that would put you to sleep. Now, I quite like that music, but we got
Mm-hmm.
all the top stuff that nobody could get, at that time. Queen and all those big numbers, anthems that
Yeah.
came out that Canada never played.
Huh.
So I did that for 10 years.
Wow. I had
I
no
used to
idea.
do I used to do schools and all sorts of parties, and I got recruited almost when I did this party for a direct marketing company. And the guy chased me for 3 months, and I said, "No, I'm too busy. I'm too busy." And it was called Best Line. They were like a mini Amway,
Hmm.
and I didn't even know what Amway was. I didn't have a clue. And he got me to go to a meeting. And long story short, I got into this direct sales company, realized I was pretty good at sales, became #1 in the country, and broke a lot of sales records. But I met Jim Rohn, who was the international vice president of training. And I had never heard anybody like him. And I got those old cassettes, that was part of our package. And there were 6 cassettes. And I listened to those, and they were very basic, but I'd never heard anything like it.
Really?
And I started teaching my team in the hospital about personal development. I almost got fired. I would take them all into the library, and for half an hour, I would turn Jim Rohn on, and they were wondering, what the hell are you doing?
Wow.
But I was fired up. Anyway, I left the lab, and Jim was one of many, many fantastic mentors.
Wow, how amazing.
Started my own Achievers program, seminars, and every month we would have these amazing people, over 100 of the top business and personal development experts in about 12 years. We did that, expanded into Ireland, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the US, and across Canada. But that was like an MBA on steroids for me. I mean, I had these guys like Zig Ziglar, all the big guys, Tom Peters, Brian Tracy, I mean, on and on and on. And I had them in my car for 3 days because I drove them around to the different locations, close to Calgary. And so I just hammered them for 3 days.
Wow. Wow.
So I was just incredibly privileged.
Yeah, what a cognitive upgrade that gives a person.
Yeah.
That level of access.
And yeah, that was the
experience.
point. I mean, you have Zig in a car for 3 days. I mean, you're crazy if you don't ask questions. And they were all brilliant. They were all very willing to share and realized I was just starting out. So I have a lot of shoulders that I was able to stand on. And, to answer your question, after 36 years, I'd done my own leadership coaching groups, written the first few books. And I guess the question that I asked myself when I hit 70 was, okay, what's the next chapter going to be about? And the specific question, Arman, was, what are the 2 things I love doing? And the answer came pretty fast. Coaching right away. I've enjoyed coaching lots of business owners. I still do that. It's a lot of fun. And the other one was soccer or football. And I just sat and thought about that for a few days, and how could I merge those 2 things, And cut a long story short, I met this guy who runs a charity in Calgary called Soccer Without Boundaries. And he had come over from Rwanda many years ago. Jean-Claude's his name. He just escaped the genocide. His story is in the new book. It's amazing story. He was 19. He was lucky to get out alive, basically. But he had this thing called Saturday Soccer Club, where the local kids from some of the social housing projects came out, just played soccer for a couple of hours. I went along one Saturday, loved it. Kids were about 14 to 19. And then I started coaching them a little bit of soccer and then a little bit of personal development. And that went on. I got more interested, and Jean-Claude was very supporting. And I said, what if these kids could learn some of the stuff I was teaching business people, particularly personal development?
Yeah.
And he said, that'd be great for the community. So I picked 11 kids, 8 of them boys, 3 girls. And every Sunday night for 6 months, I spent 2.5 hours with them in this little tiny space that they had as an office. And it was just like a beta test, a guinea pig thing. And they were unbelievable. I learned so much about them. And we give them a big exam at the end, and they all passed. 70% pass rate, which choked a few of them because they weren't expecting 70%. But they all passed. Some of them got 90s. And we had a big celebration with the parents to sort of wrap the whole thing up, give them all certificates. And then that got me thinking, where could this go? So
Yeah.
how would this work? How would I expand it? And then I come up with the idea of a 5-day camp where we would have 24 kids, and we'd have the whole week with them Monday to Friday. And we ran
Mm.
our first one. That was about last summer before the pandemic hit,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a smash success. I had a great soccer skills coach. I taught all the 5 fundamental personal development stuff in the mornings. Had a nice lunch with the kids. We learned if you don't feed them, they won't show up.
Uh,
And then Dylan, my soccer skills coach, he's still playing major league in Canada. He's a super player,
huh.
and he loves personal development as well. The kids loved it. We played a tournament all through the week. I got to play, which was a lot of fun.
That's
And so
awesome.
that was the kickoff to this. And, now we've got real big plans to expand it.
Les, what do you think is the impact, mainly the long-term transformational impact of this work in a kid's life at an early age? Like, who would they have been versus who they now will become? Because obviously in the short term you see this wonderful impact. They're able to clearly pass the assessment. You see the upgrade in their personality. How do you think that trickles down though into the rest of their lives?
Well, I take that back to meeting someone like Jim Rohn. I mean, I was totally unaware of what my strengths were.
Hmm.
I never really thought about it at a deeper level. I didn't have any big career goals at all when I left high school, and I sort of drifted into the workforce. I mean, that job got me to Canada, which opened up my eyes. But Jim was the torch that got me going. It was just so good. I mean, I don't know if you heard him. You probably didn't hear him speak live, but I had him in every year when we started the seminars.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had 3 days with him like every year for years.
Hmm.
And he was the master. There's no question about it. I mean, people like Tony Robbins.
Oh, he
Um,
credits him.
oh, totally. I mean, without Jim Rohn, I don't know where Tony would be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but so to answer your question again, yeah, I would hope that the impact that we would have would be something similar to my lack of awareness and starting trying to find my feet, that type of thing. And to have these kids at this age, though, like 14 to 19, they're like little
Wow.
sponges.
Yeah.
And that's what really inspired me. I mean, I was getting pumped just being around them
Hmm.
and hearing the questions they had and realizing what they weren't learning and all the stuff I'm teaching, which I taught to my business clients, adjusted it for their age, obviously. Um, but they don't get this in school.
Right. No
And
way.
that was the big thing that opened my eyes. And I said, gee, if we could get these kids learning this stuff and making it experiential enough, which we've done, and we're only starting with this, I the impact could be, well, it'd be life changing.
Life
And
changing.
for the
I think
one
that's
for the
almost an
ones that
understatement.
want to, like, when they see it, and there's probably 7 or 8 of those first kids that are they're amazing. I can't believe the stuff that they're doing. They're
Hmm.
little entrepreneurs. We taught them sales skills and taught them how to sell and get out and make money, and
Mm-hmm.
they can't believe this stuff.
Yeah.
You can actually make money doing this. Yep.
Wait till they learn about So Rare and
Oh, I
NFTs.
tell you. Wow.
They'll be all over that shit. Oh my God.
So I'm excited we've got a big goal in the next 5 years, impact 50,000 marginalized teens and just help them succeed in life,
Wow.
basically.
I think, and I'm sort of just, there isn't a way to truly measure this in some laboratory setting. There never will be because we can't take the same person and take them down two different roads in life. We'll never
Mhm.
know what that road would have ended up looking like. But I know from experience, and you know from experience, that we're very malleable at that age.
Oh,
And that it is so easy, if not surrounded by the right ideas and the right people, to go down a very dark path where you become a victim of life. I think that's the stark contrast between these two ways of living. When you expose yourself to the principles that you teach and just the entire world of personal development as a whole, it's about personal responsibility
Yeah.
versus just straight up being a victim of life. Why don't I make enough? Why don't I get enough raises? Why is the government doing this to me? It creates this ideological thinking of victimhood. Whereas when you
Mhm.
dive into personal development and personal responsibility, you become the master of your life. You realize that you're painting your own masterpiece and
Mm.
everything is possible. And I think the perfect example of this is, yes, obviously look at your life. Look at the incredible amount of success that you've created for yourself and the name that you've created for yourself. And now you have the opportunity to impact kids. But also, another thing as you were talking that came to mind is like, look at the generational impact. Look at your son Andrew, who I'm also friends with. What a
Yeah.
brilliant guy. Like, would you have had such a son if you had not, developed yourself to that level? I think it's a generational, like, life-changing thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a privilege to see our kids, and Jennifer, my daughter. I mean, she's just been accepted to do a master's in psychology and social science in Penang, Malaysia.
Hmm.
The university there just got word last week.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Um, and just a little quick humorous aside here. Um, Bureaucracy in Asia, it's well known, it's,
Hmm.
people have very rigid processes. And one was to get from the government, they wanted a passport photograph, a new passport photograph. So Jennifer goes and gets a photo, does all the stuff, comes back, not acceptable. Uh, why? Well, your chin is not close enough to the bottom of the page
Get
and the whole
out.
breadth. And so she does it again, comes back not acceptable four times.
No way.
And I said to her, "This is a joke. I mean,
That's a
somebody's just
joke.
having you on." And
Yeah.
I said, "Phone the university because maybe they got some leverage." And she did. She talked to the lady there, and she said, "Leave it with me.
Oh
This
my
group are
God.
well known for having some fun." They were just
Oh my
jazzing
God.
her.
I
And it
was
goes,
like, is that government inefficiency or are they
yeah.
pulling some blame? Oh my God.
But she just told me last night, she phoned the lady, and within hours, the passport photo was back accepted. So I mean, this is the stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no, and respect Fran, my wife. You've never met her yet, but I mean, she's been phenomenal in the parenting side as well, and she's
Hmm.
written two books, and so we've all been
Mm.
in that game, is just learning and growing and everything else. And I would hope it has helped Andrew and Jennifer as they go along. But we're very proud to see how independent they are. Like,
Yeah.
Andrew's in Australia right now, and he's yeah, he's just got this big network all over the place. He's into the 500 people that were accepted to the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, which is a pretty big deal.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's been
Yeah. Rarely met someone, just stands out. He just stands out. And he has an incredible ability to connect with anybody, anywhere, anytime. Pretty much knows everybody.
well, we're all published now. He did his
uh,
book, The Power of Focus for college students.
hmm.
I did The Power of Focus for women. I've done a couple of Power of Focus ones. And Jennifer and I is co-author on a big book that come out about entrepreneurship. Co-authored with a guy out of the US. So we're all published. That's
And speaking of
unique.
publishing, you're working on your book right now. You're working on another book. What's this book all
Yeah,
about?
yeah, we're getting the first draft by this weekend. Yeah,
Wow.
so it'll be out in 2 or 3 months. So,
How long did this take you? This book, this
I
draft.
look
Every book
back
is
on this
different, so.
one. It's been a long haul with this one. What I normally do when I get an idea about a book, I just have a binder, and every time I get an idea or story or something, I throw it in there. And I usually do that for a year. I never get serious about it, and it's just my process. But this time I look back, and it was early 2017 I wrote the first stuff.
Hmm.
I have enough material, I could write three books, which
Oh
is
wow.
typical for me. But getting all that down into something sizable and reasonable. What I've done is I've condensed what I've seen to be the five topics. If I had to pick five out of all the things I've learned and from other people and myself, my own experiences, those five would be. That's why it's called the five fundamentals. Those
Mm-hmm.
are awareness, which I had no awareness when I was a kid. I mean, really, I just didn't have it. The second one, of course, is focus.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the number one reason people don't accomplish what they're capable of, or even the very specific projects and targets they have.
Mm-hmm.
They just get distracted, they get knocked off, and I'm guilty of that as well. The third one would be relationships, which, is just a big, big part of our lives. When I look back on all those key people I had the privilege of spending time with, family as well, of course,
Mm-hmm.
um, and friends around the world. And the fourth one's routines. It's those practices that we do every day that do make a difference. There's a little difference between routines and habits, but they're pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is resourcefulness. And when we're in situations like this pandemic, any big crisis going on, if you don't have resourcefulness, it's going to be a tough road.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the target, tell me more about the positioning of the book and how you envision getting this out there. Who do you really want to get this in the hands of?
Well, the markets. I mean, my world is the business world,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't really spent a lot of time with big corporations. For this book, though, uh, you know, one of the big reasons for writing this book was to help the kids.
Yeah, like do you want
Uh,
to get it in the teenager hands?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll do well with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, the market is, the whole personal development market, as you know, is huge.
Huge.
Women are actually the biggest readers. So I'm doing a printed book, and there'll be an audio book, and then I've got a whole complete digital system, which I won't go into all the details, but there's audios and videos and all sorts of stuff. It'll all be digital, and that'll be part of a whole package.
That's what the
So
kids will love.
yeah, it's not just, oh yeah, they'll be all over it. And the neat thing about this is they can sell the package, and so
Mm.
they're going to make some pretty cool money.
Hmm.
And I know some of these kids already will just be chomping at the bit,
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big market. I'm going to be looking at people who've got big social media connections. I will be looking at soccer organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any big organization. My ideal client or reader, my ideal coaching client right now is somebody who's got a lot of customers, and they're the owner of the company, and they love soccer.
Hmm.
That's my perfect person. you know?
Mm.
So we have a 5-year goal, um, to sell 1 million books,
I love it.
and with that, we will fund those camps for years and years.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'm getting ideas as well, even as we're talking. But I think it's definitely the kind of book that, like, for especially a teenager who's getting use and a sort of mental upgrade out of, if they also knew, like, financial incentives drive everything.
Oh,
So if they're financially incentivized to read and consume and grow and share and can make money, it's just brilliant. It's brilliant, Les. I love it. And there's so many models for. I mean, you know this better than anybody. You're the author here for book publishing, but I'm just seeing so many innovative things lately for ways of, like, really proliferating these books out there, because the whole industry has changed so
yeah.
much,
Well,
as
we're
you've
going to
told me.
self-publish. Unfortunately, the major publishers who are having a tough time, the regular
Very.
old game publishers, but they want 80% of. Yeah, we that's not going to do anything for the kids.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able
So
to fund
there's
the
not enough
program.
margins in that. But
Yeah.
with, I mean, this whole package will be just under $200 probably, so we
Mm-hmm.
want to keep it very, very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the kids will do well out of it. So yeah, we're planning that early summer to have that ready to go. We're well on the way.
Mm-hmm. So what I really want to understand the kind of the bridge between the soccer and the personal development. Would you say that the personal development is partly meant to actually make them better players? Because, and the reason I asked this, I saw, who was this that came out recently about their mental health? I think it was Higuain, Gonzalo
Hmm.
Higuain.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was him. Yeah. And he was talking about how there was a huge stretch of time in his career that he believes he would have been a much better player had he been developing himself personally,
Mm.
investing in personal development, maybe even seeing a therapist. And I know that's not your thing, but it's kind of related, right? It's this whole
Yeah.
idea of just really spending time with the self and upgrading the self. And he just talked about how much of a better player that would have made him. And I think most of us who've played any sport have experienced this feeling of when we're down or lost or
Mm.
confused. I mean, we're terrible. Like you just don't have the energy to perform. You don't even see it in your mind's eye that you can perform. So I'm curious if that is the main driver or a small driver, or is it more about no, soccer is just the vehicle. Really, we want them to have this personal development applied outside of soccer and other areas of their life.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the driver. I mean, just based on my own personal experiences. And I should say, I mean, these kids are, I was looking up what's the best word to describe people who live in difficult circumstances. These kids are in social housing. They find it difficult to integrate, to get into the mainstream
Mm,
of society, and their parents do too. So a lot of them, have emigrated or their families have been displaced from countries where they've, been war torn, like
yeah.
Syria and all these other countries. Um, so they're not kids that just are normal, go to school and learn what you learn. Most of them couldn't speak English,
Mm-hmm.
and they learn that pretty quickly. But yeah, it's the drive for me, knowing what they don't learn, and this would apply to what you'd call regular kids too in the school system, because they don't get it either. And I would like to expand that into
Yeah.
as many types of teens as possible. But this particular group, they're super keen to learn, and the drive is. Jim Rohn told me, like, I think he was the most quoted guy on the
Yeah.
circuit. I
Yeah.
mean, he had these one-liners that were so simple.
So
And
powerful.
he said to me one day, he said, Les, and I was just getting started. He said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And I mean, it's just a simple statement, but that was so powerful to me. I'd never heard that. And when I look back at that today, that alone was a life change. Work harder on yourself
Mm-hmm.
than you do on your job. And if you went into your boss and said that, at a typical corporation, they wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's very much an individual desire to do that. But you're right about not just soccer, any sport.
Anything.
There's an awful lot going on with mental health issues, depression with athletes,
Yes. Big time.
and it's a big part of it. What the first question I ask the kids when we kick off our first day, first thing in the morning, raise your hand if you have potential.
Wow.
And there's 24 kids. And I mean, some of this is cultural. They wouldn't raise their hands
Yeah.
because in that culture, you're not supposed to brag about yourself,
Humility.
or, yeah, very much so. And you got a few kids will raise their hand, and you probably always get one that'll be jumping up with both hands, screaming and yelling to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing when we go through those five fundamentals, and Friday afternoon comes along when we have a little graduation, I ask the same question again.
Hmm.
Every hand in the room shoots up to the sky, and it's not
Wow.
faking it. These
Right.
these kids have really come a long way in 5 days. And
You're
the other thing I
you're
want to do,
uncovering it for them. It's a
Well,
truth
and the soccer
inside
is
of them.
important because they all do play soccer. They play on local teams. Um, but the thing is, yeah, they do improve their skills because they
Oh yeah.
get quite a bit of time through the week just practicing, and then we put them in a tournament. And so, yeah, they definitely improve their skills. But we emphasize the five fundamentals as they play soccer. So we're trying to refresh them from their morning sessions.
Hmm.
Uh, I know 5 days is not enough. The thing I want to do is create a whole online resource, create one of the best personal and professional development resources that these kids have access to anytime they want, free of charge.
Hmm.
And I can pull in a lot of people in the industry that will donate, their content.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be, just something special.
Well, this is the future of learning. Everything digital, obviously. Having it available in any format, any medium, any context that you prefer. And I mean, it's taking, like, I think there's so much more importance on this side of personal development and the things that we can learn through a group like this than, I mean, maybe this is a radical statement, but I think that most people in hindsight would agree that a lot of the things they learn in school, that algebra isn't as life changing as one mentor's comment of, hey, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And that could stick with them. And that one thing can often be the catalyst for tremendous change that then goes on to be generational change. And I think it's some of the most impactful work in the world. I'm curious, like, where and how did you fall in love with football? How did it really
Oh,
happen for
way
you?
back in Belfast, Northern Ireland, we had some incredible players coming through, uh, both North and South Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
But George Best was,
Mm-hmm.
my hero.
It's one of the greatest of
And
all time.
oh, phenomenal. I never got to see him live. That was my only disappointment.
Mm.
They played Scotland one year in Belfast, and he took Scotland apart on his own.
Wow.
I think the score was only 2-0, but the headlines that day were just unbelievable. And the other game against England, who were always the big enemy, and England usually won, at Windsor Park, which was a little ground in Belfast. And Best, I think Gordon Banks was in goal for England.
Mm.
And, he come out and he normally throws the ball up in the air and he kicks it, halfway down the field. There was no playing out from the back usually in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But Best was just hovering around, in the penalty box, and Banks tosses the ball in the air. Best nips in,
Oh
just
my
flicks the
God.
ball over his head from with his foot and taps it into the net. The
Wow.
place went wild. The
Wow.
referee disallowed it.
Really?
And when you see the replay, oh, that was a goal. I mean, the ball was out of his hands,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he was just so quick,
Yeah.
but dribbling. And he was yeah, I don't know if you know this, but he was Manchester United's leading goal scorer 6 years in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
he
of
was a
course, had
phenom.
his challenges with, the drink and
He had
everything
the
else.
drinking problem, right? Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, everybody played football around where I lived. We were in the back streets of Belfast. We used to get into the local games. It was like a Rangers Celtic type of thing in Belfast, which was Linfield and Glentoran, probably teams you've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd sneak our way into the games. We got lifted over, as they called it, at the
Mm-hmm.
turnstile and never had to pay. So yeah, I was really into it. And of course, we were following all the games in England and World Cups and everything else. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was definitely steeped in it.
Yeah, I think the level of like fanhood you get from someone who grows up with like a small club team, like nothing compares to that level of being a fan. Like like don't get me wrong, like growing up in London, the level of like dedication some of the fans have there to like say a Tottenham or an Arsenal or whatever it might be is huge. But I
Mm.
don't think it's the same as when you have like a small town the way you're talking about and it's like life. It's beyond even religion. It's
Yeah.
beyond and I think that's a lot of that's something that people don't understand in North America. Like they just don't understand because we don't have any example of that
No,
whatsoever.
you're
We
totally
don't have
right.
that in basketball. We don't have that in football. The closest thing to that would be like the South and American football.
Yeah.
Like Alabama football, college football like culture. Like that's the
Mm.
closest you can get to like I mean but and it's still I think not
No.
even halfway there. Not even halfway there.
Yeah. No, the passion around football, soccer is unique. And of course it is the biggest sport in the world and it's still growing and growing and growing. I mean, the last World Cup, you probably know, in Russia, it was like 3.5 billion people watched it. I mean, that's half the
Wild.
planet practically. Never mind playing it and refereeing it and all the other people that are involved in it.
Yeah.
So,
It's the ultimate
yeah,
unifier. And that is why I think that this way, like what you're doing, bridging your two passions of personal development and soccer, makes so much sense, not only obviously for yourself, because you sat down and you said, well, what do I really care about? What am I really interested in? And it was those two things. What do I really want to do? But also because it has the attention of the world and people. Like it's such a gateway for kids
yeah.
or even for adults. Like I want to move and learn. A lot of people want to play something, do something. And there's just the level of passion, behind soccer. It's this gateway. It's a unifier. It doesn't matter if you don't speak the same language as people you have on the field with you. You don't need any of that. You don't need to speak the
No.
same
Well, I mean,
language,
soccer
age, everything.
is a universal language. I mean, a lot of these kids are all different nationalities,
Hmm.
and as soon as you throw a ball on a pitch, doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, the other thing though, even though they're all into tech and video games and everything else, as many adults are, I mean, the tech world is going so fast. Obviously, it's just hard to keep up with. But you will, in my opinion, you will never replace uh, being in front of 24 kids for 5 days face to face.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't care what screen you're on, you'll never replace that energy and closeness and interaction. It's just, you won't.
It's
It's so
attention.
live. It's live.
You have
It's
their
in the moment.
presence.
Yeah, and there's so
Yeah.
much energy around that you can't get on a screen.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, you can't really have a transformational event virtually. I know people try, but
Yeah, no, we call it experiential, and it
mm,
means they actually do things and they figure out, they problem solve, and they do all these sort of things. And it's just a whole mixture of things that come together over 5 days. And I was very fortunate, to be around a man called George Adair who did this Omega program out of Phoenix. I had 12 years around him, and he was the best facilitator I ever met in my life. I
hmm,
mean, he'd have 40, 50 people in a room for 4 days, and you would just be gobsmacked watching how he how he got people to think and act and you know tell their life story when they didn't want
yeah,
to, and it was all there was no charge for it. It was just a donation.
hmm,
If you liked it, if you want to throw a few bucks in at the end. And he did that for 35 years, never charged. And
hmm.
all the seminar companies used to come along to figure out how he was doing it. He was booked ahead 3 4 months. You couldn't even get into the program.
Wow, wow.
And it
Which
was
kind
just
of,
because it was so powerful and so authentic, and the experience was so vital. I mean, it was absolutely life changing. And I
well,
was
I
around
think
him for 12 years. So,
yeah, yeah, and I'm sure like that's what I'm realizing. I'm like, wow, that must have had such an impact on you. And now, like, so much of what you do is about giving, and not that it's not always been. It's always been about contribution, but more than ever, it's this idea of giving back and philanthropy. Why?
well, I think it's a responsibility. I think as you get older, if you've been privileged enough to do pretty well and learn things, I mean, it's just like pay it forward. And for me, it's, I identify with the kids a lot because I had to get out of Belfast when it was a war zone. The troubles were really, really bad. Um, so I identify a little bit. I mean, some of their
Hmm.
stories are 10 times worse what I experienced. But I just and learning again from the people that I've had so much time with, they're all givers. Like they all give back.
Hmm.
And I just think it's actually a spiritual thing, I think.
Mm.
I mean, I think for me, this is God directed. I mean, I didn't wake up one day and just, this was a download from somewhere that I never invented.
Really?
Um, and I guess, Andrew said, Dad, I think you're uniquely qualified to do this. I remember him
Absolutely.
saying that very distinctly, and I thought, that's an interesting way to put it because I do have all these years behind me, and I've always loved soccer. I mean, so it's a really neat match. So,
What does that feel like when you say it feels spiritual and you say it's a download? What does that mean in your world for you? Does it just feel like
well, I
with
think there's,
absolute certainty it must come
yeah,
through
I
you?
think there's a creator. I think, when you look around at this world and as you get older, I think you appreciate it more. I mean, we live in a beautiful part of the world right beside the Rocky Mountains, and as you do down in California, obviously. Um, but when you think of the millions and millions of species in our oceans, never mind, never mind anywhere else. Uh, I mean, I don't think a black hole did it. So,
Oh.
but I think, people say, well, you get intuition. I do believe when you have experience, you get intuition.
Mm.
And those are things that just come to you. But I think for me, this was more, I was really at a crossroads 4 years ago. I thought, what am I going to do? Like, I just can't sit and do nothing. I've
Mm-hmm.
done all the book thing, I've done all the other stuff. And it was just like a whisper,
Mm.
and it was like, you're supposed to do more, figure it out. And then that question just popped into my head. But I believe God sends whispers. And if you're, if
Mm.
you're, alert enough, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
what I've learned is if you don't act on them really, really fast, yeah, it disappears.
Yes, I fully agree with you. I do think that those whispers exist, and what's really interesting about them is that when you follow the things that and typically they're correlated to the thing that excites you and scares you the most in life,
Yeah.
and when you follow your highest excitement in life, life itself just becomes more and more beautiful and more exciting and more abundant, and it just feels like anything's possible when you begin to follow those little whispers, as you call them.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love
as you
that.
say, I mean, you've got a great word flow. I mean, things just flow. And whether you're writing a book or whether you've got a project, when things are in flow, you know what that energy's like. It's just the obstacles just disappear.
Hmm.
And you're unstoppable basically. And of
Oh
course, we
yeah.
all get the obstacles. The bigger project you have, you're going to have probably bigger obstacles. But to me, those whispers, I'll like having those little conversations and say, well, tell me what to do next, will you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yes, flow is a very spiritual experience. Another person I look up to is one of the kind of fathers of positive psychology, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who really coined the term flow.
Mm.
Really did it for that reason. You know, he viewed it as the most, as the optimal path to being, as the highest path to being. And everyone has their own word for it, their
Mhm.
own context for it, their own way of talking about the same thing. But ultimately, we are talking about the holy, what it means to be, this ontological design making experience of like, how do I show up in the best version of me possible and feel tapped into something meaningful? Because it's very easy for people to say the opposite of what you said. I find that very interesting that you said life is more and more beautiful. I have more and more, I don't think you said gratitude, but you essentially are saying that, where
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, absolutely.
there's
Gratitude.
more and more gratitude as time has gone on. But there's a lot of people, less, that are so bitter,
Of
like as
course.
time goes on. They're just so bitter. What's the difference? Why do you think it's that you've been able to develop more gratitude and see the beauty more
Well,
versus
I
where you could
think,
have easily gone the other way?
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different circumstances for people. I mean, if your home was bombed and you lost half your family, you might be bitter for a while. And of course, all the experts will say, well, the best thing you can do for yourself eventually is to forgive yourself. And even more, the selfless service at the highest peak is to
Hmm.
forgive the people who tried to destroy you. I mean, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a choice, I think. And when we go back to the importance of awareness, which is the first fundamental for me, if you're not aware that there are resources out there, that there are people that can guide you, that you can learn stuff just by becoming more aware. And one of the basic things, of course, is that you have a choice. So you can be a victim all your life and you can despise everything that's going on and you can be a total negative. And, George Adair used to tell us he would put everybody in a circle, one little activity, and he would stand in the middle and he would say, the world is always equal and opposite. And so he might
Hmm.
say to me, what's your position about war? And I would say, well, I don't believe in war. I believe in peace. And then he would turn to the opposite person, diametrically opposite to me. And he would say, well, then this person over here favors war. It's equal and opposite. And he said, what about the person beside you, the next person? If you're for peace, well, he or she may not be 100% for peace, but they're probably more peaceful than the guy at the other side. And if you go all the way around the circle, there's people all with different variations of what peace and war is and where they play a part in it. And that was pretty profound, And Jim Rohn always said the war between good and evil. Never, it's always been that way, probably always will be that way. But if you're not aware of it, where are you going to land? And when you have the choices, and the more you work on yourself, you learn more about yourself and the people who surround you and the books you read and the influences you have. I mean, those are huge factors in what way your life turns out.
Beautiful. So, speaking of the books you read, you're almost done with this book. I know we were just talking before we started that you're doing a bit of poetry, or you're not calling it poetry.
I wouldn't put myself in that realm at the moment.
Would you
I,
bless us with a little piece before
oh,
we
this is just, I call
close
them
out?
word murals. I
Word
mean,
murals. I
you
love that.
just come out of nowhere, but who knows? Maybe that's a whisper. I don't know.
Mm.
Um, okay, so this one's called Life a Puzzle. All shapes and sizes, origins, personalities bound in a wide spectrum of age. Lots of pieces attempting to fit together, some easy, some indifferent, many impossible. People. Starship pioneers look down on our perfect spinning globe, astounded at the beauty, saddened by the conflicts. Earth, so tiny in the vastness of space, most will never see it or understand, a dimension out of reach. Community expands awareness. Seeing our sameness unlocks appreciation. We identify, empathize, even laugh together. Hope reigns. Life is a gift, metered out in short timelines. Best not waste the opportunity. Why are we here? Is there a purpose? Family, faith, sharing and caring, creating value. Can it be this simple? We ache for connection, social engagement, work that challenges and fulfills. Life, the learning experience that defies termination. Endless knowledge at our fingertips, providing guidance. Calendar schedules close in tighter, stifling any new learning. Is it time to simplify? Carve more space for the relationships that matter. True joy.
I've been to these poetry slams in New York City, and this is what you got to do. That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for blessing us with that word mural. I'm going to have to steal that phrase. That's actually really good. Les, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your optimism, your positivity, your wisdom, everything about you. Um, and I feel like actually it's really interesting. Like I'm really glad we did this type of conversation because it's a little different. I get to ask the questions, and I feel like I
Yeah,
got
it's
to see
great.
a whole different level of you, a whole new depth to you, and I'm just really grateful. Thank you. Let's get 1 million copies of your book sold. How do we do that? How do people viewing, people listening help you do that? And how can they support you in general?
Well, you can contact me pretty easily. I'll give you a phone number. It's 403
Ooh,
295 1115. That you'll get me directly. I don't have a big staff or anything, so I'm pretty easy to contact.
that's
Or
amazing.
if email is better, it's les dot h at thepoweroffocus.ca.
Beautiful. So I'm going to include that for people in the show notes as well,
Thank you.
just so they can easily email you or text. Is that call, text, everything? That's amazing. We got the phone number of Les Hewitt. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And is there any specific way that people can support you just immediately after listening to this if they want to take action other than contacting you?
Yeah, anybody interested in furthering the cause with the kids, be very happy to talk to them. We just covered the surface stuff, but there's
Mm-hmm.
lots more details. I do coach a few business owners,
Mm-hmm.
and if anybody's interested in that part, that's usually a year commitment. But I really enjoy just having a handful of people, and I still like that challenge. And if anybody's interested in that area, they can call me as well.
Beautiful.
But it's
Thank you
mainly
so
for the
much.
kids. Yeah.
Got it. Absolutely.
I
Thank you so
should,
much.
if you've got another minute, that I don't know if you're aware of this for benefit business movement that's happening.
Tell
There's
me.
different words for it, but I've done a study recently about how much annual profits do businesses give, to charities or nonprofits or whatever the cause is, and it turns out across the country it's 3 to 5%. It's probably the same
Hmm.
in the States, which fine, they give that amount. The for benefit companies, though, and that's what I've turned the power of focus into, is where the business is actually driven by the cause.
Hmm.
So for me, the cause is the kids, obviously, right? So we want to give 50% of our annual profits to the cause.
Wow.
3 to 5 is normal. And so even the big corps that do give millions, but if it's only 3%, banks and some of the bigger corporations, it's a lot of money they give, but percentage wise,
Right.
and you probably know this, Arman, and Andrew's done a ton of work on this, that consumers today are looking to see who has a cause and who hasn't a cause.
Mm-hmm.
And if the product or service is fairly equal, they're leaning way over towards any company that's doing something good for the planet or people or whatever. I think it was 91%. One of
Yeah.
Andrew's surveys showed that, I mean, which is very, very significant. But, yeah, and the other thing, businesses have to stay profitable, they must be sustainable. And I think what's happening, and I'm seeing it, is more and more customers are coming to those companies,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of businesses across the spectrum. And because they give such a portion back, they're actually going to do better in business and be more profitable. In fact, there's some leaders around the world that I know are saying that the answer to the biggest problems in the world today are profitable, sustainable businesses.
Hmm.
They're the ones. It won't be governments. It won't
Right.
be charities who do tons of good work, but often are just gasping financially.
Hmm.
So I'm definitely cheering that revolution, and what a difference that would make.
Yeah. Massively. That's a huge share. And good on Andrew again for getting that data.
Yeah,
We would have been known that.
of
Wow.
course.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Les. Really appreciate you. This has been a beautiful, awesome conversation as always.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, and good luck for the rest of the year.
Absolutely.